to a brand new episode of the Doctor's Podcast with Rabea Akram. I am Rabea Akram, a medical doctor, an aspiring neurologist, and in this podcast, I interview other doctors, healthcare experts, peak performers, and I bring you their stories and their formula for success and optimal performance. And today I have a very interesting guest. His name is Dr. Aman Amir from the United Kingdom. Aman is a medical doctor, a general physician based in the UK, and he's a author of 5 fiction books, and he's a very inspiring person. In 2020, I've done one episode, part 1 of this podcast, and since then we've been wanting to do a second part because there were so many interesting topics that we just were in a flow talking about. And today we want to touch some of those topics, including creativity, how to become a peak performer while being in a stressful job as a medical doctor. And I'm super excited to have this conversation. So Aman, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rabea. I'm not too bad, thank you. Happy New Year. Happy
New Year to you.
Did you have a restful, peaceful Christmas?
I did. It was fantastic. It was more than I expected. I had both the Christmas Eve and the New Year holidays off. And I was not working in the hospital, which is rare because the past few years I've been working either Christmas or New Year. This year I had both of those days off, and I had some time to spend with my friends and family, and I'm eternally grateful for that. How about you?
Well, it was a very interesting one this year. This past year, I mean, a lot has happened since we last spoke. I think was it 2020 when we last spoke. I must say thank you for inviting me back and having a round 2. I really enjoyed our conversation last time, but if it's been 2 years, a lot has happened in my sort of life in 2 years, and this Christmas was very unusual because sadly we lost our mother this year. So it's a very difficult. I mean, even last time when we spoke.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear this, Aman. My deepest condolences. I mean, the words are never enough to express that. Please go ahead. I totally interrupted you there. You were saying.
I know that you also know how difficult a thing it is to go through, and of course, when we spoke last time, I think it was mid-pandemic, and we even touched then on how difficult life would have been or had been at the time for so many people with their loved ones, with work and all the rest of it. And I think for me in particular, it was very difficult because I was working during the pandemic, obviously, and meanwhile still doing all the other things as well as caring or trying to care for my mum who'd been quite sick and unwell. And so it already unfortunately came to its conclusion, as it were, and mum sadly passed away earlier this year. So I've just really been trying to figure it out since then. And so this Christmas was a very interesting situation that I've never really been in. And it was actually quite nice in the sense that there was a bit of a bidding war with my friends in terms of who would have me this Christmas. So it was really nice to feel the support and the care from my sort of friends, who I would say as my extended family. So it was different, it was new, and unfortunately it's something that's we have to sometimes go through in these sort of difficult times. So yes, it was interesting. So I won't lie, I won't say it was an amazing Christmas. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
But one that's one has to go through sometimes to try out, really.
Aman, I can totally relate to you, because in 2020, back when we spoke, it was a similar Christmas for me, because that's the year I lost my mom. And that's been a year of big downs and big struggles and big difficulties for me and my family. And it was about that Christmas time that you feel it even deeper, when it's, you feel it all the time. It's a loss that one can never really truly recover, and I see it in myself. But I really can relate to what you went through. And once again, and apart from Christmas,
because and it's not even I said Christmas, but of course it's a festive season, and I think a lot of people would say happy holidays, just to sort of be most inclusive. And I think from our point of view, having grown up in the UK, it's more about the fact that this period of time, especially I was talking to a colleague about this, in terms of when we were younger, the sort of Christmas period or the festive period was a period. You'd have time off school, you'd have holidays, and it was a much longer spell of time where you spent time with your family, your parents, your friends. And as I've grown older, that period has got shorter and shorter and shorter, and sometimes it really just feels like everything is about one day, and then it's just over. And I think, as I said, it's not really, it's more the fact that you have this memory bank of occasions and all these years of those periods where you spent a lot of time with your family. Hopefully, if you're blessed enough to have a family growing up, then for me it was more remembering all of those occasions, all those times, all those really lovely memories, and that's where you feel it. And I think it's whenever you come to the first of something, that's when it hits you the most, isn't it? When it's the first of, if it's a special occasion, a birthday, an anniversary, or whatever. I think these are certainly times that these things hit you. But then again, sometimes it's the very small things. I mean, me and my mum, we had a bit of a running joke. Every year she would buy me a year planner, at the end of the year. And one of my, presents was always a various, a multicolored year planner. And this year, I went to buy my own. And so it's sometimes just the smallest trigger. Sometimes sadness, but again, how you look at that. Because on the one hand, I'm obviously very sad, but on the other hand, I feel very blessed that I have all of these memories as well. And that's the only thing you can sometimes hold on to, is that the blessings that you had in the past. If you can speak out those things, and that just is something that's hopefully gives you enough strength to move forward.
Right. What has really helped me is to kind of hold on to those memories, like you say yourself. And at the very beginning, it was hard for me even to revisit memories, and just painful, kind of, just missing my mom even more. But with time, as I have kind of come to live with it, and that's the healing process, right? When you start to heal a little bit, then you become more at ease with those memories, and you kind of are not so afraid anymore of revisiting memories. So it's different in everyone's case. In my case, it was at the beginning, it was even hard for me to be thinking about memories of my mom without really feeling really down. But that has, with time, like time heals a lot of things, and with time I can see that I'm able to appreciate those memories and feel blessed, like you said, feel blessings for those much more easily. So time definitely changes a bit of that as well.
As you know, Rabea, I'm quite a reflective soul, and so a lot of my time I do spend thinking about some things. And my father passed away when I was much younger, and so my whole life feels like dad, childhood, and then my father passing away, then all of up until my mum passing away just recently this year. And it's so strange, isn't it, when you speak about somebody in the past tense. Even now, speaking about my father, is difficult, and that's nearly 30 years ago. So I think, and again, we don't always give credit to people when they're with us. I spent a lot of my time going on about my dad in the past. I'm pretty sure my mum would have got bored of me going on about my dad, but it made me realize more recently that just how much of my existence, my adult life, my mum had been an influence on, and it's a lot of my activities and a lot of the things that I've been able to do. I had her backing and things like that. So it was always. So these are the things that I have to sort of think about and try and understand a bit more. But since we last spoke, because Mum hadn't been well, a lot of my time was about taking her to appointments, bringing her back, trying to spend time with her, obviously do my work, but I was still writing. And it's just been, when we talk about creativity, just how important having an outlet or having something to do that frees your mind from, I guess, the stresses or the burdens that you have. Because when I speak to other people and I sort of said, well, I was able to, I've got 2 more books out, all this, that, and the other. People would just say, "How? What? When?" Because of course they knew that I was really busy with one more work or things like that. And in answer to that question, it was like, well, it's not really a case of, again, setting that target and saying I'm going to do this. During the pandemic, during my time away from work or obviously I was always with Mum, but I was still trying to complete or do the books that I wanted to do. It's always really nice then that you achieve that and you go, oh, actually this happened and I was able to do this in that time. So I think it is still really important, no matter what you're going through, to have something that you can express yourself with, whether that's fitness or writing or whatever hobbies that you have. And it doesn't matter, I guess, whatever job you do, you should still be able to have something outside of that sort of fulfills you. For me, writing became almost like my form of counselling to myself, if that makes sense. I had these very friends in a setting, and I'd be writing about them, thinking I was in that situation with them, and it just felt really quite an interesting bit of escapism, which I love for other people to read, actually, because when you're writing, you're so into it. When people read back and go, "Wow, that really resonates with me," or "That was really interesting." That's particular. So one book I wrote is called "The Invisible Minutes of Every Day," and it's really set around the beginning of the pandemic in the UK. And it's the first 10 days of how COVID sort of hit, and it's from a viewpoint of lots of different characters. And while writing that, it was really interesting for me because obviously I was working as a doctor in the pandemic at the same time, so I was hearing lots of sort of accounts from patients and colleagues, which I felt like I needed to write about, really. And it was quite almost, I won't say journaling, but it was keeping a mind. So when people have read that and give me some good feedback, it's been quite nice.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting that you sort of combine the happenings or the things that you gather in your everyday work life. You're able to kind of channel that or turn that into your creative work. And I think that's super inspiring because you don't separate one from the other, that your work as a medical practitioner, as a doctor, you're getting all your creative ideas, inputs, a lot of it from that, which you bring into your creative space, which is writing, and there you express it in a different form, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's just so many interesting things happen to everybody, don't they, every day? I mean, I'm just thinking, even today I've heard 5 or 6 really interesting things through patients, families, and whatever. Even stuff that happens to me. So, for example, today, I managed to sneak off and then get to the cemetery where my mum is resting. And obviously, you get very involved and quite emotional about where you're at. So, I get out of the car, and there's quite a few more people. It's usually very quiet when I visit, but there were other visitors, and so I get up to my mum's grave, and obviously, I'm having a quiet thought. And it's very interesting, Rabea, where if you pick up on what's around, you learn so much. So while I was in that moment thinking about my loss and my grief and my mum,
Right.
a gentleman walks over with a young child, and he's only a small kid, and I won't say too much but the point is that the child had lost their mother, right? Yeah. So while I'm grieving about my mum, I took the time just to notice that there's a little child who's slightly unawares because the father was obviously very upset, and it was like a sign. It was like, well, you're grieving for your mum, and you're in your mid-40s, and there's a little kid here who's lost their mum, and it was just. So these are the things that I've become far more sort of receptive to. Maybe in my younger years, I might not have even noticed. I would have been just in my own bubble of this is happening to me, and you get very absorbed. Right. I'm able to sort of now step back and look at what's actually going on, and that's what's very inspiring. And worth, I think, writing about. And so many things happen around us, and we're very privileged as doctors because we get a real front row seat on everybody's lives, and sometimes not writing about those people, but using those situations and those incidences to think, well, how might this character respond if that happened? So it's still fiction. It's just thinking about those scenarios and things like that. And I guess the more I write, the more I'm sort of observing these things and thinking, oh, that might be interesting, or that might play out differently had it been this character, so on and so forth. So yeah, I try and bring it all into one space, really.
That's wonderful. I want to ask at this point, how do you so you get these ideas from different instances, ideas coming here, a piece of information here, there, a piece of idea, and so for creative folk watching, like the creative process looks different for everyone, right? Some people think well when they are, some people are night owl, they're doing their structure plotting, or, doing their writing in the middle of the night after a long day of work. Others, like you said, you're thinking about those things while you're driving, and then you have most of it in your mind, and then you would put them down on, actually write them down much later. So tell me how the entire process would kind of look like for you, because for me, creating a piece of art is a lot of the times having a system, to be able to actually continuously or continually produce a quality piece of content, writing in whichever form you're creating. It not only needs talent or idea, because a lot of people have ideas, they're very talented as well, but are actually not able to have a system which allows them to be so able to like put all those ideas and execute all the actions that need to be, and to actually produce something. And I think you're a super good person to learn this from, because you have written 5 books, 5 fiction books, 5 novels in like 2 years. That's a lot.
No, but yeah. No, I think it's more than 2 years. I won't say that I've done it in 2 years. I think it's been a bit longer than that. But yeah, I mean,
Still.
I think you know this, and anybody who's got ideas knows that there's lots of ideas. Everybody, there's in a day I have so many ideas about so many different things.
Right,
I'm
right.
surprised, patented something yet, because I always think that's a genius idea. That's amazing. Sometimes you don't write it down. Sometimes you don't remember it. Sometimes one idea leads to another idea, leads to another, and you forget what the original thing was. You've already moved on to some mutation of that idea. But I think different people will have different ways in which that they want to reach the end point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think last time we spoke, I briefly talked about how I had this one idea of, I'm going to write this book. And in fact, the second follow-up book is the story that I wanted to write, but I didn't feel I had the know-how or the expertise to finish that book. So I sort of almost wrote a prequel, which was going to lead to the next one, if that makes sense, because I wanted to try something. And I think so one thing is about goal setting in terms of, how will you get to the end point? What will you do? So, of course, if I'm writing a book, I'll decide, well, how many chapters do I really want in this book? How many words am I going for? Do I want 10? Do I want 12? What is this? Is this a long story, short story? What's happening? So once you've got that idea, then I'll say, right, okay, fine, we've got 10 chapters. Well, what kind of overall story are we going for? What needs to happen when? So there's a lot of planning or plotting, but of course, if you are really involved with the characters and you understand the characters that you're creating, it doesn't go to plan, because you think, oh, I want this to happen there, but actually this scene has become something else, and so you have to then be able to contain that and edit it in terms of it fitting. So it's the best way to describe it is lots of small jigsaw puzzles within one big puzzle. And I'm the worst at jigsaw puzzles. I don't know why I gave that example, but the thing is that you have to make that chapter work, and then think, well, how does that chapter sit in the next chapter? What is the story that I'm trying to tell? What are my themes? Is there a message? Is there not a message? And everybody who writes will have a different look or feel of that. So in the books that you mentioned, the 5 that I've written, in fact, this is going to sound really funny. This is my first novel, right?
Right.
And
I know this one. You told me about it. I haven't read it completely yet, but no, I haven't. I am in the process, Aman. I am in the process. I will read it.
You can listen to it now. It's even in audio. But
awesome.
So the point is that this was actually the hardest for me to write, because I'd never written before, and I'd never, of course I thought I could write a story, but I wasn't sure how I might do this and how I might actually go about doing all the things I'm talking about now. But I realized early on that I do a lot of thinking when I'm driving, and we joked about this last time, because my commute is was 45 minutes that way, 45 minutes. It was very easy in the morning when I'm sort of all coffeeed up driving to work, thinking about, oh, hold on a second, this is a good idea, that might happen. And before I start my clinic, I might just actually put some things on my phone. I just go, well, that's bullet points, these are interesting things. Then of course I do a day or whatever it is that I'm doing, and then on the way back I think about these bullet points and think about, actually, how will I write such and such. And every night I do a little bit of writing, and I try to always write a little bit, and then come the weekend I might add it all together and have more of a page or two. And it's a process that I have got better at, because over the years you start getting into a rhythm. So the first book was hard for me, because I had to think about, well, how long does this need to be? What's the story that I'm telling? And like I said before, it's not the story I wanted to tell. It was almost like the lead up to the story I wanted to tell. So finally, the second one, right? This is the follow-up to the first. So last year, obviously with mom and all the rest of it, it was very difficult, but I finally finished this, and this is the story I wanted to tell. And the idea was that it was supposed to be a 3-part thing, where the story just continues over the 3 parts, but each part is seen from a different point of view. So that was the idea, that all the characters in the first novel are in the second novel and the third novel, and that's a trilogy of of sort of three novels. And but what you see is the first part is from a certain point of view, and the second part is so I find that very interesting about points of view. And because like we mentioned last time, I sit in court and I always hear two sides of the story, and I always think that both are trying to tell their version of truth, but truth is somewhere else. And that's why I thought this would be a very interesting way to tell a story. And so that's this project of writing. Meanwhile, I learned a little bit about shorter stories and sort of almost poetic flash fiction stories, which I found interesting because there was a different way of writing. Yeah, so one is like a very linear novel, you're writing about one particular character and such and such. When the other one just gave me a lot more freedom about circumstances, and so I wrote two sort of short story books called Askew, which actually are all still part of the same story. So even though this story, the part one, the part two, and hopefully part three, the short story books are still part of those stories as well, just from a different angle again. So say, for example, you're the lead character, and it's about this. In the novel, it's all about you, but you and I are sat in a coffee shop, and in the main book, it will be about your experiences of having a coffee with me. But in the short story books, it'll be a third person walks into the coffee shop and sees these two people talking, and they're so it keeps pivoting, and the story is being told from so many different angles. And so that's what the short stories allows me to write about, even more characters, that bigger picture, which I think is really interesting, because sometimes we search in our lives a meaning for our life. We all want to be the hero. We all want to save the day. We all want to do. Whether sometimes maybe the main purpose of our lives is not to be the hero in our lives, but to be the extra in somebody else's, and that we could be somebody who changes the course of somebody else's life, and that might be our purpose itself. And sometimes being a doctor, it feels like that you're not the main character, but you're the one somebody's come for some advice or some kind of treatment, and you maybe them go on and do great things. So I think that's where a lot of my excitement and interest for the writing comes from, really. And in all of this, I can throw in a lot of the medical stuff, or a lot of my own personal life journey stuff in there, with hopefully messages for the reader to enjoy and understand.
Love that. How did you start writing? Like, did you always want to write fiction, or is this something that just came to you? You started writing about 2-3 years ago. That was about the time you started working on your first fiction. How did you come to the idea?
Rabea, when I was little, I used to write short stories all the time. Yeah, I remember we would come back from holidays, and my dad would say, we weren't of a generation that had, all the fancy gadgets and stuff that are around now. If my nephews go on holiday, they enjoy themselves, take pictures, videos, whatever. No one's asking them how it was. Yeah, when we used to come back, my dad would say, "Go and write." What happened, and I would write these long essays about, on the first day we did this, on the second day, and I just got into this love of sort of writing. I used to keep a little bit of a diary when I was a kid, so I think my very first story I actually did send off to a publisher when I was about 11. I had no idea if it even went anywhere. I obviously didn't hear back. It was about a little boy in a fishing village who catches a fish, and it was just
that's so cute. Like, you were 11.
Yeah. So I always used to enjoy writing these sorts of things, and at school and things like that. My teacher once said to my so I used to write a lot of poems and did really well in the English language, and I remember my dad and my teacher having this conversation, and my teacher thought, he genuinely said to my dad, "Is this his work, or is he just translating like other poems from other languages?" And my dad was like, he doesn't speak any of the languages. Well, how is he going to do this? And so he genuinely thought I was like copying and pasting stuff from other languages. But, so it was always there. But I think, like we mentioned last time we spoke, when you enter medicine and you sort of follow that path, of course, there's not a lot of scope or time to really engage in other activities or things. If you need to get through a training, you need to do your postgrad exams and all the rest of it. Something has to be put aside, and I think that's what the last time. That's unfortunately that a lot of talented people come into medicine, but not always onto their talents, or they don't really sort of get an opportunity to tap back into that, which is why, a few years ago, I got to a certain position that I thought, right, I could now do other things. And I think maybe I must have regressed to my childhood or something, and that's why I've started writing again.
Oh, okay. I love that, that you sort of revisited that childhood passion and you took it on, on from there where you left off. Would you say that you having done all that work in medicine, that where you didn't have the time to pursue those passions, would you say that there is some bit of like sense of lost time in it, or would you say you enjoyed 100% of whatever you did and that was something you needed to do? Because the reason I ask this is a lot of the times I've recently had conversations with a few of my colleagues, and a lot of them say that being in medicine was for them a bit like going through these periods like you go through medical school, right? That's like in Germany it's 6 years, in the US that's 5 years, I don't know, in the UK is also I guess 5 years, so that that's a period you go through, and then again you go through your training. And my friend the other day was saying that to me it seems like we're moving from one goal to the next and it's never ending, and kind of like you're always looking to the next thing while life is happening now. So can you relate to that, or has it been different for you? Also in terms of, creative work, and you said it yourself, you had all those passions and then you came back to them after getting to the certain position. So what's your take on that?
Well, I should probably rephrase what I said about time. Because when people often ask me this question about, well, where's the time? How do you have the time? How do you get the time? And I think my answer to that has always been, we all have the same 24 hours. So no more or less time than somebody. Well, do you understand what I mean? We all have 24 hours in a day if we're lucky that we make it through the day. So it's how we divide that time, and we divide that time based upon what is important to us. Yeah. So when I was at medical school, what was most important to me was the desire to complete my education and become a doctor. So my childhood dream was to become a doctor. My childhood dream wasn't to become an author.
Okay.
I enjoyed those things, but nobody said, if somebody would have said, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was, I want to be a doctor. So if I want to be a doctor, my use of time is exactly right. I went to medical school. I achieved those things. Yeah.
Right.
It was easy. So everybody has their challenges. Will face challenges at whatever stage of their life, and that's the question: do you really want to do this, or do you not want to do this? And hopefully, I answered the question, and I pursued and completed. So, my use of time, or I don't, at that point in time when I was studying, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to publish books and I want to write fiction, or that that was parked. It was something I was interested in, always was, but I didn't see my future in that because I wanted to be a doctor. So that's the question that the individual has to answer to themselves. Am I using my time appropriately? Is this what I want to do? If it is, then the sacrifice is totally worth it, because you're sacrificing to achieve what you want to achieve. That's absolutely okay. Yeah. Now, if you are, so these days I see it a lot with medical students in particular, who are very enterprising and have lots of hobbies, and have their own channel and do this and do that and all the rest of it. In fact, I should be asking you that question. While you're training and you're doing all these things, you're still having podcasts or whatever, which is great. Yeah. There must be a desire to do that, and that's why you're doing it. Yeah, so that time is spent wisely if it's fulfilling. In our day, those things weren't there. Maybe I would have got distracted anyway if I did do those things. Maybe I might not have completed my medical journey because I might have got distracted. So me writing at this stage is only after achieving those things that I had set out to achieve already. If I had been halfway through and thought, do you know what, I want to do something else, then that's fine, because you make a decision at that point saying, well, actually my time is invested. I think the fruit might be better here or whatever. So I think young people now who are studying medicine, they need to ask themselves, do I really want to be a doctor? Is it something I want to do? Do I want to be a neurologist or this or that, whatever it is that what I want to do in my life? Is that my working life? Then if they've got lots of other hobbies or activities that they think, oh, actually, I might succeed in these things as well, then they need to ask themselves, if they reach a point where somebody says choose between the two or three, and they say, well, I'll dump medicine any day and I'll do these things, then they're the who are going to feel that they wasted their time studying medicine, aren't they? Because they're going to say, well, I was going to dump it anyway, why am I doing it? Yeah. But I know that medicine has been the spine of everything that I've actually done. For me, as a become a doctor, and everything that I do in my life comes off of medicine. All of the opportunities I from studying medicine. So when, in fact, only the other day, a patient and the parent came in, and the parent said, oh, she wants to become a doctor when she grows up. Any advice? And I was sat there thinking, well, okay. And it's very difficult, because you want to be a good role model and you want to be supportive, but equally this interaction is as a patient doctor, so it's not really the space to be totally mentoring somebody, and also you're a bit tired in your clinical day and you can't really bother talking about positive stuff about medicine. It's very difficult when you get put on the spots like that. But if a young person wants to do medicine, I think it's good to encourage them. It's good to be able to say, look, you've got to want to be in that position, but again, do the research. When we were younger, we didn't, it was a case of simple journey, really. GCSEs, A levels, university, get through. If it's, I think there are very many avenues now that you can get into things and do different things as well. And younger people have access to information. And what they need to do is have access to mentors and gain some kind of experiences before they make these decisions. Otherwise, why did I waste 5-7 years doing something if you're not, if your expectations are not met? So you need to have really understand the expectations, before you do anything, really.
That's a great answer, actually. So, if you're already doing that which is your dream, yours was to become a doctor. So for you, doing those grind, like all the hard work didn't feel like a waste of time or very hard work, because that was taking you towards your goal. So that is, purpose driven work. So when you're actually within your purpose, then none of that really actually feels so difficult. So I love that answer, because within that answer you have all these, you have all the answers. Actually, if this is becoming such a burden to someone, then they need to be asking themselves if this is the right thing for them and if this is their dream. And especially young people, before getting into medicine, especially, or getting into anything, need to gather information. They need to do the research, find mentors, maybe do some sort of shorter trainings to see if this is the right thing for them, which was actually the case with me, because before even deciding to go for the neurology specialty, I had worked in psychiatry, I had worked in internal medicine, I had, seen other disciplines, just to make that informed decision, to know really for sure that, yes, I want to, spend the rest of my life working in this field. And for that, one needs to try out different things as well and keep an open mind while doing all that is super important. So I love that journey, like you said that this has been the spine of everything that you've done. So you have found that through medicine, you have found out all these other avenues to kind of expand and explore and further grow from there, but everything at the same time keeping medicine as the main core of the fundamentals.
So I think, and I hope, I can only speak for myself. Obviously, I think everybody is a unique individual and have their own life journey. But the reason why so we said that I've started writing, but that was something that was about me. That was my core anyway. If I mention that medicine is the spine of all my activities, well, the city that I studied medicine in, the people that I met during my medical school, the life that I've led, have all come from that time. Yeah, and maybe, well, I like to think I haven't changed as a person. So when we started this conversation and I mentioned that, my father passed away and then all of this, and now my mum, to me, I feel like I'm on the same, I had a lot of opportunities to be able to reflect between what it was like when my dad was not well and what it's been like when my mum has not been well. And the difference has been time and the fact that at one point I didn't know anything, and then at the other point I'm quite a senior doctor, and that in actual fact I haven't changed at all because in both circumstances I was a son. Yeah, and when you understand yourself and you have insight into yourself in terms of what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what makes you understand yourself a bit better, then these things become, I won't say easier, but just more palatable. You can face hardship and you can face disappointment when you go, well, actually, I didn't get this, but that's my fault because I didn't try hard enough. Or this didn't happen because those circumstances were against me. But next time round, I can do something different to make the circumstances more in my favor. And I think they're the important things, really. I mean, we are, whether it's a journey in medicine or any other career, everybody's always learning. So the second that you think that you've reached the top, or the second that you think that you've done it, then that's where your growth ends. And so you have to forever be able to want to change, to want to adapt, to want to become better in your field, but still be rooted to who you are as a person. And you're still learning who you are as a person right up until the end, I think. And so that's the journey that I feel I'm on. I'm always trying to find out about myself. Well, why do I like this so much, or what's this about? And more recently I've been able to think about, well, of course I would like these things because both my parents were good at these things, or my brother's good at these things, or of course this is the environment that I grew up in, so I would naturally thrive in these sorts of things. And once you know your skill sets, I think you're able to be more productive. So like I said, I wouldn't advise everybody to sit in their car and plot for journeys, or their stories or whatever. But I just know that that works for me. Yeah. People have to find out what works for them first, and then do what they need to do. So you need to know what's in your favor, what's your advantage. Everybody revises for exams differently. Everybody's idea of a good night out is different, and so know what's yours, learn what you're good at, and then you will, I think, thrive in whichever field that you're in.
Right.
There's no point being disappointed about the hard hard work or the hours on an on-call if that's what you dreamt of doing when you were little. You can't be upset about that, because that's the dream that you had, that you wanted to do that. If I say I want to publish a book next year, I can't moan about having to write, because I'm doing this because I want to achieve that goal. So you have to, I think, push yourself. You have to keep. I'm learning this more now. I didn't always, but you have to believe in yourself. You have to know that you can do this. There are very many people who will not necessarily believe in you, or not necessarily back you, or not necessarily think that you can do whatever it is that you want to do. So I more and more I'm thinking, well, I have to be my number one fan. I have to be my the person who pushes me along, especially now. Not more because mum's not around, although mum and I didn't have these conversations, but it's nice to know who your support mechanisms are. And I think you have to be gentle with yourself as well. On the one hand, you have to motivate yourself, but you can't keep pushing yourself and be disappointed if you're not reaching certain goals. Just understand why you're not reaching those goals. Keep reminding yourself that those goals are important, or remind yourself why you think that they're important, and then just take each day as it comes. I think that's the important bit. Like I mentioned to you last time, I was really so excited about writing the books, I forgot who's going to read them. And so there's a lot of learning on the other side, and thinking about, well, actually now I have to do different things with it. So it's a continuous journey with those things. But I think in terms of creativity and medicine in particular, I think medicine's it's becoming more and more challenging day by day, whichever field in medicine that you're working with. The pandemic hasn't helped. The other situations make it even harder to be resilient and to be strong in your working field, as well as having a life outside of it. And I think if you can look after yourself mentally and physically, and emotionally, as a doctor and a human being, and understand that you will also go through the experiences that your patients go through. And I think that's really important. When I used to take my mum for all the visits and all the rest of it, you can't help but notice just how difficult it is and how challenging it is, when things are not always explained properly, or people don't really know necessarily what they're talking about, and misinformation or miscommunication. These things happen throughout all systems. And I think when people are vulnerable, they're not well, you get an even more sense of responsibility over what you're doing. So certainly at this stage, when I'm watching those interactions, it makes me think one of two things can happen in this situation, Rabea, is that as a doctor who's looking after his mum, who then passes away, I could easily go, I don't want anything to do with this anymore, because I'm so hurt, so emotionally charged, that I hate anything to do with healthcare, illness, disease, because emotionally it's affected my family and me, right? Or the other way of looking at it is, you see so many poor examples that you think, actually, I'm responsible. I need to make sure that this doesn't happen to someone else, or that I want to make other doctors more confident and enabled, that they feel confident that they can have these challenging conversations or conversations. And I think I'm trying to muster up the energy to do the latter of the two.
Yeah. No, this is right. I mean, absolutely. So, you take that example and shift it around to, so make sure that it doesn't happen with your patients, or anywhere where you can make a difference, that you do it. Yeah, that is absolutely right. It's a way of looking at it. What can I learn from this, so that I can contribute, in the future in some positive way? Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Aman, this is going in many different directions. So I had a few questions in mind, but I'm not sure which way. Right. So what I wanted to add to that is, for me, that fundamental question of what is it that is the right thing for me, having been able to answer that has given me tremendous strengths to be able to, and also motivation to be able to, do everything at the same time. And we all have 24 hours in a day, but at the same time, some people will be so much more productive with that time that they're given than others. And for me, what I've found out in the last year is, in the last 2 years, I would say, is having the why, like why I'm doing this and what is my purpose. That's the biggest driver, or the motivation. And then the energy and the time, it just, everything falls around, because I would say now I'm doing much more than I was doing before. And I'm able to get all of that done and still have enough motivation to get on Zoom and do this podcast with you, after having done all those, hospital shifts and everything else that I'm doing, because I know, like, this is something I enjoy doing. First of all, it doesn't drain my energy. It rather gives me energy. And for me, it's a creative outlet. It's a way for me to, take all that, everything that's going on around me at my job in medicine, and to sort of process all that and to channel it in a creative and positive way. And this is a big outlet for me, I would say. So those are the purpose that I have. It took me time also to get here. And there has been a time in which I was pretty much lost, because I knew there are too many things that I am interested in, right? There are too many passions, and there are too many interests, and not being able to do one, or putting my full attention to one, kind of makes me feel like this is a sacrifice I'm making. Is this something I want to do? And going through those doubts and those difficult times has sort of taught me to also prioritize. And now it's all about knowing why you're doing this. And if you stay with it long enough, and if you really get into the weeds of what how this process works, also training, medical training, the better you get at it, the more you start loving it. That's what I would say. I mean, the more you become an expert in something, the more you will love it. So for sometimes you just have to first put in all the work, and then the reward, the internal reward. I'm not talking about the external reward, which also comes, but the internal reward, that you feel good about it, that you feel doing it, like just going through the process of doing it just becomes all the more enjoyable. So that has been my experience with it. Apart from that, Aman, writing books, we talked about it. Balancing careers, we've talked about it. Do you have a suggestion, like something else you want to like put out there for the people watching, something you think is super important to talk about?
Well, just to sort of follow on from what you just said, I think, so I mentioned earlier about the whole wall planner story, yeah, and how my mum always used to, one of the presents at the end of the year, obviously around Christmas time, was a wall planner for the next year. And that's actually been a massive thing in my life, because every year at the beginning of the year on the wall planner, I make a list. There is nothing better in this life than lists. When you put a line through a list, or a tick and a point, honestly, it's amazing. So I always set out some goals or some things for the year that I would like to be doing. And then I work towards those. You won't achieve all of them, but at least you know that you've got a plan. I would block off a month and say, well, this is what I'm going to do there, or I'm going to do this. And it just, for me, it just brings order. Yeah. And I think lists are really important. And I think you just mentioned there about, the more work you put into something, the more you might get out of it. But actually, I think, and if we're going to talk about medicine in particular, everyone should have conversations with their 10-year-old self. Yeah. if to get into medical school, usually there has to be some burning desire at a young age that you want to become a doctor, or you've been sort of, you've been coached into that situation. In which case, if you're first, second, third, fourth year medical student, you should always be able to speak to your younger self and go, wow, I'm actually doing, or it's not easy to get into medical school itself. So for those people who are in medical school and are not enjoying it, they need to ask themselves, what is it that they're not enjoying? Because either, again, sometimes it's just that your expectations have not been met. You think that it was going to be something else, or the experience of learning might be something different, in which case, things can be done. You can find a better way of learning, or you can find people who might be able to support your journey differently. Finding good mentors is so important. When I went to medical school, I wasn't, I've always been quite shy. People disagree with me, but I've always been really quite shy and nervous. Yeah. And I think certainly in the first few years of medical school, I was quite, I would say I was quite sad and quite sort of low because of the situation that I was in after my dad. But meeting the right people and meeting people in senior years who sort of supported me, or even in the faculty, there were members of staff who were very, very, very generous and kind, and who looked after me, really changed my outlook and my learning sort of journey. And I think people need to tap into that. There's a lot of people who are willing to help and support. And so what I would say to younger people in medicine, find those resources, find those people who can help you understand yourself better. Find what suits you in terms of your learning styles. Not everybody's about reading. Some people are very visual. Some people need to be on the wards. They need to sort of see patients to make it real. Whatever it is, find out and just pursue that. But if you're really not happy, then you need to think about why you're not happy, and is this going to be the long-term thing for you? Because nobody, I don't think being an unhappy doctor is probably not really the way forward either. Yeah, it's not safe for the patients. It's not good for the individual. I just want people to be able to talk to their younger self and say, why did I want to do this? And remind themselves, and then hopefully use that as some form of motivation. There's loads to say. I mean, from my point of view, we spoke a little bit at the beginning. I'm just in a very different and unique situation in my life where, and it might come to many, where you just have to sit and think about what do you want moving forward. For me, the writing has always, over these past few years, has been quite an important thing. Clinical medicine is obviously important. I'm involved in teaching. I still really enjoy that. And just really trying to find maybe new things to sort of excite me. But like I've already established, medicine is the bit that everything comes off. Yeah. So whether I was doing creative stuff on TV or radio or this or that, it was all came from medicine really. And so I'm hoping to stay honest to that.
Love that. That was really a good conversation, I would say, Aman. I really enjoyed it. So before we wrap it up, sorry?
I know, I was just wondering how many minutes we did, because you said 40, so it felt like a decent conversation.
Right. But we could go on, like I could go on. However, I just want to ask you at this point, anything else you want to join, you want to add to that?
Well, in terms of my advice for people, or
in general, is something you want to share with the audience, with the people watching?
I think that sometimes we are so, I mean, it's good to be focused, it's good to be driven, it's good to want to work towards goals, but then keep your eyes and ears open. Sometimes opportunities just fall in your lap, and sometimes we just don't notice these things. Like I said earlier, even in my deepest sort of sadness and sorrow, I'm now able to at least notice that there's still other people who might be worse off than me. I used to suffer a lot of back pain and problems, and it's a strange thing. Whenever I used to get like twinges or stuff, I would see somebody, move past me, either in a wheelchair or on crutches, and it just felt like somebody from above was giving me a telling off and saying, "Why are you feeling sorry for yourself? There's people who are struggling, who are coping with less than what you have." And so I think if you're receptive to these things, you always feel you can exercise gratitude, and I think it's really important to be in a situation where you can just look around and go, wow, I still have this. This is really important. And the reason why I'm saying that is because last year, when Mum was not well, and I was getting quite sort of overwhelmed with a few things, I still managed to take part in a TV show that had nothing to do with medicine. And I'm only mentioning it because it was a day outside of my usual activities, and it was fun, and I met new people, and I made some new friends. And had I said, and I wasn't in the mood for it, I didn't feel like doing it, I thought it was going to be a waste of time, but actually I really enjoyed. I said yes really reluctantly to something. I took part, made some friends, and I really enjoyed it. And I look back at it and think that was actually hilarious, and I'm just glad I did it. What I'm trying to say is that when you're so focused in your own whatever it is that if you say no or push opportunities away, you'll miss the chance to change and develop and adapt. And that's an important thing. I've done it loads. I've said no to lots of things, and I've been very driven to say I'm going to do this and this and this.
Yeah.
People should sometimes take a step back and go, this is a bit outside of the box. This is not my usual thing. Maybe I should go into, maybe I should do something that's outside of my comfort zone.
Wow. Love that. Yeah, because absolutely, like, we're so focused on what we want, like what we have as goal to do next. So we just, sort of not notice everything else. And that's super important. I've seen this too, that sometimes I would not do something which I didn't have in mind, and it would just open up a whole bunch of different doors for me, So that's a really good one. That's a really good one. Yeah.
If you're too rigid, when pressure is applied, you'll snap. If you're slightly flexible, you might bend into shape, and that's okay. Yeah. So I think you're a little bit more bendy.
So true. I love this conversation. I had a few big takeaways for myself as well, because the next year is going to be not an easy one for me. I know that for sure, because last year of neurology, the 5th year here in Germany, I'll be rotating in the ICU, and that's a lot of responsibility. You're taking care of patients who are just hanging on to their life, and you really want to bring in your best so that your patient get the best care. At the same time, the hours are so crazy with COVID going on now. I don't know how the situation in the UK is, but here in Germany, it's pretty bad, right? One doctor ends up doing the work of 2 or 3 doctors often. So with those crazy hours, with those, challenging patients, I know that I have to be on the top of my game, and I have, only this much of time, and also other ideas, like things I'm passionate about. So I am very driven and motivated to use every bit of time to learn, to to grow, to study and learn, to just become better. So listening to you, someone who has been through these things, or already, like, you've already done your training, you're already established in your practice, and you are doing all these things, having learning from you, listening to you saying all those things, also gave me personally a lot of input that I needed to hear. So I thank you also very much for taking the time and doing this. And I thank you on behalf of all the people, especially people in medicine and also in other challenging areas of work, who listen to this and who are definitely gonna get some value and benefit out of listening to this. So thank you, Aman. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Rabea, for inviting me back. I think I didn't put you off last time, so that's always a good sign. It's always nice to talk to you as well. You like you said, you're driven, you're ambitious, you've got lots of things to look forward to. But I think it's important to recognize that everything has its time as well. And sometimes, I was saying this to my friend the other day that, mum has passed on. I've got this amount of time to grieve. I planned the whole thing. I thought, oh, over 2 years down the line, I'll be, and the mind wants to do things because it's able to sort of rationalize and do. But actually, sometimes, and my friends were saying this, you just have to let that time pass. You just have to do what you can do in that moment. And so this is when you've mentioned it before, being present in that moment. Sometimes we've planned everything else, but we're missing this particular moment here. And you have to actually experience what you have to experience now. And even though I know how long it might take to grieve or how long it might take to whatever, I also know it's these things you can't get over very quickly. So you can't sort of plan your life according to when you think you're, you're not sure when the pandemic might, when COVID might change. You're not sure about the situations, working, commitments in your field. There's lots of unknowns. But what you do know, hopefully, is that you're committed to your training, that you will complete, that you have some other projects that you will do. And when they will all fall into place, because they will fall into place. There's some things that we should just let go because there's a master plan somewhere. You just do what you can do in that moment. And if if you're honest and sincere to your patients and to yourself in those moments, you will just get through, hopefully.
I love that. Thank you so much once again. Thank you, Aman. And I wish you also a really successful and hopefully also a very, I don't know the right word, because you're going through not a very easy time.
Something I forgot to mention. I did mention that this was the second follow-up, yeah? I completely forgot to mention that all the proceeds for the sales of this book are going to worldwide cancer research, okay? So the book is available on Amazon, but the proceeds for the sales of this book are going to worldwide cancer research. Okay, so that's an important thing. I always.
That's a really important one. I'll make sure to put that in the descriptions. And Aman, I hope that these times that you're going through, that they're easy for you, that you're able to learn and grow through them and emerge stronger as a person, and have a great 2023. And I do hope to make a part 3 of this one because it was just so amazing.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll just not age. We'll just keep doing it every so often. Yeah. No, I look forward to speaking to you when you've hopefully completed your training as well. And we've spoken about your training and things like that. So I think fingers crossed that will all go really well for you, and you'll have a super successful 23 and beyond.
Thank you so much. Take care, Aman. Bye. Bye.